All right. Well, I want to start this off with two of my favorite viewers.
Oh, we're going right to the questions.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome to Unplugged episode 25.
I was wrong last week, wasn't I? Did I have the number right last week?
I don't know. I
don't know.
changed it.
You
So
changed it?
you don't have to worry about it.
All right.
No one cares.
Episode 25, if you're keeping score.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Kristi. That's Andrew over there in the chair. Ha. Anyway, like I said, I want to start out with two of our, I don't know if this is your opinion, but they're two of my favorites.
Okay.
Our regulars, C Booty
C Booty.
and Dwayne.
Okay.
Dwayne,
They are favorites.
they are favorites. C Booty says, Kristi, you were right. Those Sooner fans crawled back north of the river with their tails tucked between their legs, hook 'em horns. That's exactly what happened. I don't know if any of you watched that game.
Yeah.
By, I want to say, like the third quarter, the OU fans, those paper clips, weren't even in the stadium. Fair weather, you are. Anyway, can't wait for this Saturday when we meet up with Georgia.
Yep.
There's my college football take.
All right.
Anyway, C Booty says, this review brings up an interesting general question I have for you two. If you were to hang up your reviewing career and invest in one set of speakers for the foreseeable future, he's giving us a max of $10,000 budget, which is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Would you buy a pair of floor standers or a potential higher quality pair of bookshelf speakers?
Well, I would do one of two things. To be keeping it real, I would just keep what I have, which is the SVS Titans and the matching center. So that would leave me, what, $6,000, $5,000 left over to put in a bank account. Because I'm exceedingly happy with those speakers. I kind of find new things to appreciate about them every day. And so I don't have a burning itch to upgrade, change, see what's on the other side. Does that mean that they're better than a really good pair of bookshelves, or would I normally choose bookshelves over a tower? I don't know. I just, like I said, I'm very happy with them at the moment. So I would just stick with them, or I would take that $10,000 and go a little bit nuts since I'm no longer a reviewer and I get to just have what I have. I would probably do some sort of really, really great installed solution with like in walls or whatnot, so I could just maximize my living space and not have it be a thing about gear.
I could stay with the Titans.
Yeah.
I could. I might go back to the Concept 50s from KRISTI'S just because I love their form factor and I think they're great.
Yeah, they're a little smaller.
And I would connect those to our like in ceiling speakers so that we could have surround sound. That's probably what I would do. Yeah, when you think about it, like the $10,000, while it's a lot of money,
Yeah.
I have very expensive tastes. And so it's not quite enough for my fantasy world
Yeah.
getting to step away from this this job.
Yeah, I think it also goes to show you just how good that kind of $3,000 to $5,000 or $2,000 to $5,000 market has really become, because it's just one of those things where it's like, I'm not saying the Titans are the end all be all, but they possess enough little things of so many different experiences that I've had with multiple kinds of loudspeakers, all in one sort of package that's so easy to kind of live with, enjoy, but also tune if you're kind of a tweaker with like PEQ and stuff, and they respond super well to like Dirac, that at $4,000, you would have to give me a budget of around 40 to 50 grand for me to outright say, okay, I know what is going to be out and out better for me. But I'm also fully willing to admit that at those prices, I'm also wanting to invest in a little bit of interior design jewelry. And that's where the Beolab 50s, great sound quality, don't get me wrong, infinitely tunable. I love that about them. Smaller stature, love that. but they're also sculpture. And in my space, if I'm just getting to live in my house and like normal,
Like everyone
like
else.
everyone else, instead of my house also being, my place of business and a set. I want it to look really nice.
Great question, though.
Oh yeah,
You guys sound off in the comments and let us know what your $10,000 budget system would be.
yeah.
And then I want to go on now to Dwayne.
Okay.
Dwayne. He's the best. He says, I get the sense that the new Q series from KEF versus the R series closeness and quality sound is similar to what happened with the R series versus the Legend series. I think he's speaking
Polk.
of Polk.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's
The
yeah.
use of tech from the higher end line ensures the more budget friendly option has a lot of value for customers. It makes the unattainable attainable for more consumers. I love that. Actually, it makes good sense from a business perspective too, because everyone wins. Question for you: is this a trend? Will others follow this act in components and build quality, i.e. KLIPSCH, RP versus Heritage, as an example? Also, are the expectations of hi-fi consumers changing as they witness some brands like KEF and Polk provide better value?
100% they're changing. 100%. I believe enthusiasts' expectations are higher than they have ever been. And I mean that. I believe that given the strength of the internet, modern technology, just what is possible and how, as a community, people are able to share in what's possible, even if they haven't experienced themselves. It's just everything has been ratcheted up and dialed up to 11. So the expectation is through the roof. Now, what people are willing to pay for that expectation is probably lower than ever, because I believe so many people have taken to learning more about how some of this stuff works, that they would look at a graph like the Q11 overlaid with the R3 and go, you know what? I'm willing to bet that I'm not going to hear a difference, or once I do Dirac and all of that, I'm actually going to benefit from the slightly greater performance down low of the Q11 to the R3, never mind the R11. Now, the one thing, and so I think that a lot of brands, and they kind of always have, but I think a lot of brands are going to be following suit more along the lines of what Polk did and now KEF.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah.
I kind of think that maybe you're going to see well, let me back this up. I kind of think that brands are being put in an almost unwinnable situation. And I think you may start to see some brands do what KEF has done here, where they're giving some of their higher end models, or they're putting what their higher end model of speakers can do into the more affordable entry level. But then I think that you may see brands just step away from one price point altogether. You know, whether they may just say, you know what, fighting for the lower end entry level market is just not worth it. It's
saturated.
It's so saturated.
It's saturated.
Yeah, that it may not make sense to go after that market. And so that in that situation, I think you might see some brands step out and away from maybe what they've done in the past and just focus on the higher upper echelon of this space. I don't know if you
No, I mean, it's
agree. Or...
I believe we've kind of had this conversation in several unplugs, and it's true. It's true. The trickle down is great. Bringing it back to Polk and KEF. One area, though, where I don't think that KEF went full Polk is when looking at the Legend series and then the Reserve series. In my humble opinion, what Polk did with the Reserve series was simplify the visuals in a lot of ways and give people a little bit more choice with the Reserve over the Legend. So you got the same drivers, largely the same speaker lineup, and largely the same components, but in a far more flexible visual package, in which case I kind of feel, and I have no real numbers to back this up except for just how many people talk about the R line as opposed to the Legend line. I think upon the Reserve Series introduction to the market, Legend was dead. I think KEF was smart to definitely bring our meta tech to the Q line, but they didn't take it so far as to give people no reason to look at the R line. Like, there are some advantages there, especially if you're one that prioritizes, build quality and things like that. As for the rest of it, brands are definitely at a crossroads in terms of trying to not only figure out how they can operate at a level they need to operate to support employees, dealers, and things like that. And while I get it, at the end of the day, we do kind of look at certain things, especially purchases, through the lens of our own wallets. And while we want to care about the careers and livelihoods of other people, it can be a hard thing to kind of keep in the back of your head sometimes when making a purchasing decision. Like, it's very easy to vilify a product's higher price as saying like, oh, they're ripping you off, they're taking advantage of you, when in reality, it's like a lot of these products support not only the people in the company or the brand that make them, but they support every aspect of the economic chain down the ladder. And some of these other products that you can pick up for, pennies on the dollar, don't do that. They just don't do that.
That's a whole deeper.
That's its own video.
That's right. It's its own video. So I'm going to move on to something Francesco said. He says, well, it seems to me that the R and the Q are marketed for entirely different pocketbooks. Given the huge difference in price, you can add a very capable amplifier and sources to the Q11 and still be shy of the cost of just the R11. To a lesser degree, the difference in price, almost double, could still be a factor with the SVS, where the Polks at a similar cost is just preference in looks and sound.
Yeah. No, the choice to go between an R700 and the Q11 Meta is going to be, in my opinion, subjective. It really is. It's just going to be which one you prefer. The only caveat being, and I know someone took issue with me on this in a comment sometime, the only issue being is I do maintain that the Polk R700s may require a slightly larger investment in an AVR or separate power amp in order for those dual 8-inch drivers to be fully controlled and to be played or used at their maximum potential. But apart from that, and I'm not talking like, oh, it's going to be an extra grand. I'm talking like, $100, $200, extra in just thinking of amplification to make sure that you're getting the most out of those dual 8s. But apart from that, it's going to come down to preference.
I thought this next one was an interesting question.
Okay.
Naveed asks, has a question about neutral speakers.
Okay.
Are they boring below reference level? Based on how we hear, I'd think the treble and bass would be perceptually lower in neutral speakers versus a V-shaped speaker at low to mid volumes.
Yeah, it's possible. It is possible. It's one of the things I run up against if you're trying to listen at 40 to maybe 55, 60 dB in room. Loudspeakers with a little bit more of a V-shaped curve or a little bit of boost in the bass, a little bit of rise in the treble or upper mid-range. It definitely helps at lower volumes for sure. Neutral speakers, typically when you're playing at true reference, commercial cinema, THX type levels, they tend to be a little bit more agreeable at those volumes. So it really does come down to what kind of listener you want to be. Understand that in my humble opinion, a product with a little bit of a V-shaped curve can be kind of leveled out using EQ, room equalization, room correction, stuff like that, without running the risk of introducing distortion or without radically changing the efficiency or sensitivity of a loudspeaker. Whereas if you're trying to boost signals, that's where you run into the potential for introducing distortion. It's actually easier to cut than it, or better to cut than it is to add, which is why so many room correction type products typically cut or bring boosts down rather than inject energy in, because anytime you're injecting something, you could be stressing the driver or the amplifier or both. And that's where you could run into issues for clipping that may have not existed before.
Well, speaking of boring, after living with a more neutral speaker for a few weeks, there's nothing that will make you think they sound boring faster than a speaker that isn't, quote, neutral.
Yeah.
Which is what happened for me with the Q11 Metas. We had those speakers set up exclusively in our living space. And that was for a few, like I said, several weeks.
Yep.
And I thought the KEF sounded great. I was surprised by how much bass those things had compared to what I recall of the R11 Meta. And I was enjoying listening to them immensely. Like movies especially was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then Andrew brought out our SVS Titans to do some direct A/B listening tests between those, the Titans and the Q11s. And oh my God. It was
night and day.
It was so night and day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I could, play a song for a minute or so on the Q11s, and I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. AB flips it over to the Titans, not even knowing he was doing this like a true blind AB for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
There it is. The Titans were so easy for me to identify that those were playing. The sound was so much more interesting, in my opinion.
Yep.
But I also, like Andrew said, you have to know what kind of listener you are, which is something that I have said to you guys for years now, that I am that listener. I am the listener that does prefer just a little bit more energy.
You like contrast.
Yeah.
You like sonic contrast.
And I prefer it. And sometimes I actually need it. It does help with intelligibility, in my opinion. So as much as I really enjoyed the Qs, I prefer the Titans, if anyone's curious about my thoughts. I think the Q line, it's really interesting because I think that KEF's done a great job at creating a little bit, a slightly smaller speaker in those towers. They are a lot more living room friendly. Compared to the R11 Metas, which I loved how they were more narrow and slim in their format, but they are so tall that they can be an issue if you're wanting to use them to listen or to watch television.
Yeah.
Depending on your room size and how much space you have to give those speakers room to breathe and, deal with placement concerns and stuff, it could be limiting for you there. So in that respect, I would probably steer you towards the Q11. But if you are extremely limited in space, then I think maybe going with the R3 Meta would be a nice sort of in-between compromise, I think, because you can add a subwoofer to the R3 and I think get quite a bit of what you might find in the R11.
Yeah, I mean, you're paying about the same to go from a Q11 tower for a pair to the R3 Meta, which is a three-way bookshelf. They're both around $2,000 for the pair. The R3, if you're trying to match the bass, though, of what you get in the box, so to speak, with the Q11, they need a sub. They just do.
In my opinion, I do agree with you. I do agree with what Andrew just said. If I'm trying to decide between the Q11 and the R3 Meta, because I I cannot afford or do not have the space or whatever for the R11 tower,
Okay.
I would choose, if the budget permits, I would go with the R3 Meta and bring in a subwoofer because you can, I think, feather that in and have tighter control, more control of your bass. I think that is more easily achievable than if you choose the Q11.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Did I explain that right?
No, you did. You did. I just want to, the only thing that I want to make clear is that what you described gives more placement, room, flexibility, and adjustment. 100%. That is 100% true. But you are describing a mildly more expensive way to go, depending on the subwoofer you choose. And you have to factor in the stands. And the R3s are hefty bookshelf speakers. So this is not a speaker that you're going to want to just put on any like Amazon stand. You're going to want to make sure that it's pretty supported.
That's true. And I've tried to say that, if your budget allows, but I'd still choose the Titans over the Qs. Hopefully that was clear early on. And so now I can move on.
Okay.
I think this next question from Frank Doyle is somewhat in line to what we've been talking about in terms of differences in listening preferences.
Okay.
Frank's question is, would you consider a different target curve to help make the frequency response comparison easier? Flat anechoic is excellent, but in room, most people prefer a downward sloping response, something like the Harman target as an additional dotted line.
Yeah, I mean, I can do that. That's not a problem, and I totally understand where you're coming from, and I get it. I mean, heck, if you use Dirac, they don't use like the Harman curve, but they do set their house curve or their recommended house curve to that, gradually sloping line. So that makes sense. And I'm totally about it. Of which I would say that the Q11 follows that sloping line in room. The reason why I still include, whether it's near field or in room, what I'll refer to as a reference line, which in the case of 90% of our graphs I have in the legend is 75 dB, is I find that with a lot of measurements, it's not always stated what the volume is as to when, at what volume did the test tone sweeps occur. And so when you're left guessing, it can make differences between peaks and dips look really, really bad. When in reality, if let's say, for example, I have a peak at 85 dB, but I have a dip at that goes down to 80, 82, and you're like, oh, wow, that's a 3 dB difference, and that's really, really bad. It may not be if the reference volume was 83 or 83.5 decibels, in which case you're only looking at about a 1 dB dip and about a 1 dB, 1.5 dB rise, which may or may not be actually audible. And if I don't give you that context, I can point to a difference and go, look, this is a problem. So I hear what you're saying. I just wanted to be clear as to why I still include the horizontal line of what I choose as a reference volume. And for people that may be like, oh, well, reference volume should be higher than 75. Again, it can be whatever you want. And I do test speakers 75, 85, 95. I carry out most of my tests at 75 just because I am often in the room when I'm doing these tests, and I don't have to tell you, doing 20 to 20 or 15 hertz to 25 kilohertz sweeps at 95 plus dB, it's punishing. It's punishing, and that's not a statement against a speaker, good or bad. Oh, well, a good speaker won't be punishing. No, at those volumes at 20, 25 kilohertz, that hits in a different way. And at 75 dB, I'm able to be in the room for several hours while carrying out all of these tests without necessarily damaging, my hearing and whatnot. And I do want to be able to carry these tests out without having to wear like hearing protection, because if there's an issue, if I hear a resonance, if I hear a rattle, if I hear this or hear that, I want to be aware of it, as opposed to if I wear hearing protection and do it, I might miss those things. But I have no problem with the downward slope. I think that's a good idea.
Utah Raptor wants to talk about the Q11's off-axis performance.
Okay.
How well are the Q11s in dealing with off-axis situations, such as standing instead of sitting in the main listening position? Also, I'm looking to build a system in a den dining room type of setup where my sofa is the main listening position at 10 feet away, and the dining chairs double as a pseudo second and third row, 15 feet and 19 feet away, respectively, in about an 18 by 22 by 8 foot room. How would the Q11s fare with this home theater slash multimedia configuration? Finally, thank God they come with grills now.
Yes.
I have pets, yo. That's a callback to the Q750 review.
Yeah. No, I was very happy that I saw grills in the box. That was actually a surprise because historically Kef has charged, I think, like 50 or $60 for grills. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah, I think you're going to be okay. It sounds to me like you have a couch and then you have kind of a dining table behind it, in which case you're using your couch maybe in an more open space as kind of like the room divide. We had a similar situation in the Austin house. So if I'm picturing it correctly, I think you're going to be just fine. I've found the off-axis listening to be quite good. Maybe not the best that I've heard, but very serviceable. The vertical dispersion of the center channel, obviously our center is below the TV, was fine. We sit a little bit higher than the center channel. And the Q6 is not sloped like the matching SVS center for the Evolution series, and it still worked just fine. It worked great. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I think you'll be okay.
Okay, this next comment came from Gaming Revenant, and I kind of feel like this is something that happens to not just obviously Gaming Revenant, but it happens a lot in this space where people start to second guess their purchasing decisions, whether that's because something new has come out or something got discounted later, or, maybe other reviews have started to persuade them that maybe they should have done X instead of Y. Anyway, so Gaming Revenant says, yeah, no matter what you say, I made a huge mistake going for an all R home theater system. So assuming he's talking about, they are talking about the KEF R line.
Yeah.
I should have waited 2 years and saved myself almost €5,000 if they're that close to one another, with differences so unimportant you'd never hear them unless directly A/B testing. Any R series speaker is, as of now, a total net loss of money spending. Makes me really feel like I made the wrong choice. What would you say?
I would say I disagree. I disagree with the logic behind the question, especially because you quantified it by, I should have waited 2 years. To everyone that buys a Q11 Meta today, if they wait 2 years, there will be something different. There will be something, quote, better.
It might be cheaper.
And it
so
might
they
be,
could
and it might be cheaper. Exactly. I mean, everything gets better with time. Everything typically also gets less expensive with time, as manufacturing efficiencies and whatnot start to play a role. As
New products come
out, trickle down. I mean, once the initial R&D expenses are absorbed by initial sales of, say, an R line, that technology, those parts, they're able to flow downstream because now we're just paying for their cost as opposed to their cost plus their development. Did you waste your money though? No, especially if for the last 2 years you have been enjoying your R series home theater because this Q line didn't exist. I don't want to say the only reason you're upset is because the Q series turned out to be good, but the opposite could have also been true. It could have not been as close, in which case you would feel vindicated in this thought experiment. Like, oh, thank God I spent on the R series.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like hindsight's always 20/20.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I want to make sure that it's clear that while there are a lot of, like the difference between the Q and the R line is close or not like wildly separated, I still think anyone that has the R series, and then if they brought in the Q series next to it, I bet you're going to prefer the R. You also have to consider the build quality, the finishes of the R series do look better, and so unless you want to pretend that you walk around blindfolded, those things do play those things do influence people.
Sure.
But I also think the R line is a better product. It is.
It's more flexible.
You would
and
just
better.
have to decide as the customer whether or not you feel getting like that last 20% or whatever difference is worth spending the extra money.
Well, you can also look at it from the standpoint of when the R Meta line launched, which was a little over 2 years ago, or roughly 2 years ago. Imagine being a KEF reference owner. I mean, I haven't heard a KEF reference speaker, but if this is the way KEF is working now, I have to imagine anyone that had KEF reference and the R11, the reference 11 equivalent, and then R11, if they were able to do what we did between the R line and the Q line, let's say those were similar, in which case every reference customer writes the comment you just wrote, but you buying an R home theater, you're like, ha, smarter than you. So it's all kind of relative, and I would just try to not look at your financial outlay through today's lens when in reality you made that decision years ago.
So I want to get into some of the comparison questions that we received. We got so many. This episode's probably gonna be 1,000,000 years long.
Oh, can we have a best of list on the comparisons?
So let's just get into it. Mr. Banana Man wants you to go into a little bit more about your thoughts on the R3 Meta. We've had that speaker. We're not going to review it.
Yeah.
So here's your chance to give your elevator review for the R3 Meta.
My review of the R3 Meta would be, it is probably the most jack of all trades, perfectly serviceable. I can't really fault it. Bookshelf speaker at around $2,000 that I've heard.
In a while.
In a long while. Would I buy it for myself? No, but that's me. Because while I can technically appreciate it, while I have nothing really negative to say about it, every time that I would switch to Titan's Yamaha bookshelves, heck, even the Monitor Studio 89s, there was always an aspect of their performance that I was like, oh, I like that. I like that little something, you know? I mean, even the B&W 705 signatures, that's like, oh. Now, admittedly, like the signatures are a wildly different speaker, and you could argue totally inaccurate compared to the R3. I know why the R3s are popular. I get it. It's a great speaker at that price point, and if you are someone that values neutrality or just measurements in general, it's incredible. I just never found myself always preferring it. I can enjoy it. I can listen to it. If someone were like, hey, this is just a pair of speakers you're going to live with forever. Okay, it's fine. But would I choose them for myself? Probably not. Probably not. That's kind of how I feel. That's kind of how I feel about them. And that's something that I just keep going back to our reference versus preference unplugged. Because when I chose the Titans and sent the R11s back, a lot of people were like, you said it was a top 5 speaker. And it's like, it still is. It still is. Technically speaking, it's so proficient and so good, it's hard to fault. But my preference leans a different way, and I just prefer certain things about other speakers. And that's why, to the very first question, or one of the first questions of this video, like, what would you get? It wouldn't be the R3.
Moving away from the KEF to KEF comparisons,
Okay.
Diane M. and JJ Newbold both had some questions about how the Q11 metas would compare to speakers from Q Acoustics. Specifically, Diane wanted to know, how do the new Q11s compare to the 5040s? JJ Newbold wants a comparison to the Concept 50s.
Both the Q speakers, in my experience, they have a much larger soundstage. They disappear within that three-dimensional space with greater ease. So there is even better separation between the various, not only right and left channels, but the elements that are going to exist within a recording within the soundstage. Q Acoustics has that on lock, up and down their line. I just want to be 100% clear about that. The Q Acoustics, though, because of that separation, the density, the sensation of density between the speakers, around the speakers themselves, may seem a little bit lighter compared to the Q11. That isn't to say that it is, it just might have that sensitivity, or that sensation, apologies, it might have that sensation. You may be able to get away with the Q11s without a subwoofer in some situations. I don't know if I'll go so far as to say that about at least the Concept 50s. 5040, I'd still think maybe they need it. If memory serves, even the 5040s were more 50 hertz-ish, maybe 40, whereas the 11s, obviously in room with boundary compensation, get below 30.
I think it really depends on like if you're a bass head or not.
Yeah.
For somebody like me who doesn't really want, who would rather not have a lot of bass, especially if the bass isn't well controlled,
Yeah.
and it starts to muddy with the rest of the response, then I'm like,
Q Acoustics.
Q Acoustics.
Yeah. The Q Acoustics have just a little bit of, I don't want to say sheen, but just a tip of energy in the brilliance department of their tweeter that just brings a little bit more of a sensation of airiness. Some people may pick up on it, some people might not, but other than that, that's kind of my take on how they would compare.
Okay. Gonna move on to Martin Logan. Fam Nikita and AZ Rob both had questions about Martin Logan's Foundation 2 F2, Foundation F2,
Yeah.
and how they compare
Okay.
to the Q11s.
The Martin Logans are going to be more of that V-shaped curve, more of that dynamic, contrasty, a little bit more bombastic sound. Very similar in not, okay, when I say very similar, you have the ability to take the Martin Logans and work with like a Dirac or whatever, or if you like that downward curve. There's more energy to play with than with the KEFs. So you're not going to run into having to inject something or force something that isn't there to suddenly be there if you find, say, the KEFs to be a little too neutral for your liking. Build quality wise, very similar, to be honest, very similar. Apart from that, yeah, if you want a little bit more bassy, punchy, dynamic, call it almost even KLIPSCH RP type fun sound, the Martin Logans, the KLIPSCH RPs, 8000 F2s, stuff like that is going to go in that direction. Q Acoustics is going to be more in the middle. Your KEF line is going to be more on that neutral, that more neutral side.
Well, we had a ton of people that wrote in and asked about the XT F100, which is
that's like our money.
with which is also by Martin Logan.
Yeah.
Your pick or your thoughts on
I mean, if you can swing the XT F100 or that XT line, you are getting a demonstrably better built, in terms of materials, finish, just general structure. I mean, it's a stout speaker for sure.
I love that speaker.
It's a lot of fun. It's like it's a grown up, refined KLIPSCH something, you know what I mean? But better. Yeah, I mean, it's just gonna be, it's gonna be more of the same, where it's like you're gonna have more bass. The bass is gonna be potentially more controlled, more dampened, easier to EQ. You're going to have a little bit more treble energy, which could improve intelligibility for some people. You're going to have the ability to crank that mother up to its breaking point before you start hearing resonance or rattling in the cabinet. Yeah, I mean, is that going to be better for everybody? I don't know. But we are talking about a speaker that's $5,600 for the pair in the XTF 100, pushing R11 money, which is why we made that comparison when we did that review, versus something that can be picked up for $2,100, $2,000 a pair. I don't think it's that fair of a comparison, but if you're going to go off just measurements, again, if you prefer a more neutral speaker and that kind of a thing, like the KEF will probably measure better.
And I think the same goes for KLIPSCH. Aaron French had a question wanting you to do a quick comparison with the KLIPSCH RF 8000F Mark II in this week's Unplugged.
Yeah.
I really do feel like we've kind of addressed the KLIPSCH to the KEF to the Martin Logan to the whatever.
Yeah, with the exception of Q Acoustics, the Martin Logan Foundation, the XT, and the RP, the one thing that I will say is if you like your dynamics to have a bit of snap on the whip, the Q11 can punch. But in true KEF fashion, it's not Bruce Lee. Like it punches and then pulls back. If you like some of those punches to have just a little bit faster recoil, that extra ounce of dynamic contrast, the Martin Logans and the RP 8000F, maybe to its detriment in terms of measurements, are going to have that. They just are, especially the RP 8000F Mark II. That's going to slap. So if you're like, that's my jam, that's the speaker you should be looking at, knowing that you may not always agree with every part of it, but undeniably it's going to have that slam.
Okay, moving on to monitor audio. We had a lot of questions about various speakers from monitor audio and how would they compare. Specifically, Chris asks, how would the KEF stand up against the Silver 507G?
Okay. Again, monitor audio is, in my experience, there was elements of RBH and KLIPSCH in monitor audio in that you get a little bit more of a neutral, more linear, more composed top to bottom response with just enough hits down low in that dynamic snap, partially maybe because they use aluminum drivers. I don't know. But that's one of the things that I appreciate about monitor audio. At lower volumes, there can be very just even keel. But as you turn them up, they do pick up just that little bit of energy that always makes them a lot of fun for me. I think visually, I prefer monitor audio products visually. I love some of their wood veneer finishes. You are definitely, especially in the silver line, you're definitely getting a nicer finish, a better finish cabinet. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. If you want something that isn't quite so true to the source, but more neutral than, say, a Martin Logan or a KLIPSCH, but has traces of that bit of snap and fun, especially with certain source material or as you turn up the volume, I think that's a great way to look at monitor audio.
Well, I have one more question for you from Vadim.
Oh, last question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And whether we include this or, who knows, this could be another video topic. But Vadim says, with such a vast amount of choices now available in this hobby and price points, it's becoming harder and harder to locate a lot of them in one place to demo. What do you consider the best way for people to demo speakers, especially for those who don't know what kind of sound they're enjoying most, or they're looking for what they're looking for, or maybe they're brand new to the hobby altogether?
Yeah, I told them I was going to think about this one too. I mean, I know what I did coming up when I was, in my teens and stuff. Like, I just went to as many stores as possible. And one of the benefits of being a teenager was I knew I wasn't going to be able to afford any of it. So it really did afford me the ability to go in and, while to the chagrin of a salesman, maybe, because I'm just loitering really, did afford me the ability to just sort of listen to everything, knowing that I didn't have to make a decision. And I would encourage people to listen like that. I fear that too much of one's listening experience or broadening of horizons is tied to having to make a decision versus just having the experience. I don't know when that started, because I used to, like I said, I used to go to stores, trade shows and stuff like that. And I used to just listen just for the exposure, not necessarily because either I was on the market or I wanted to make a change. Nowadays, it appears that everything new has to either convince you of what you've purchased or convince you to change. And I don't think that that's a healthy attitude to have. So I would encourage people to go to their local dealer and be upfront with people and just say, hey, I'm browsing, I'm looking, or I'm not in the market right now, but I could be down the road. And just, if they let you go on a day where they're not going to be busy, if you notice they are helping a customer with a sale, don't interrupt them. Just be a fly on the wall. If there is somebody who is a qualified buyer in that moment who's getting a demo, but they don't mind you being in the room, be in the room. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't ask for special anything. Just take it in. And a lot of times it can be really beneficial to just stand in the back of a room and take it in versus be in the sweet spot. Just take in the general vibe, the tonality, the sound. So I would encourage people to do that. Go to trade shows, but don't go to trade shows with a tiered list. Don't go to Axpona or whatever with some sort of tier list, like you have to rank everything. Just go room to room. Just go room to room. Pay attention to the things that, I've noticed these 6 rooms elicited a feeling from me. That's it. That's the only commonality. Don't worry about what it was, how it was. Well, this was it. No, they just elicited a feeling. Like I went back to that room 2 more times. Okay. Then all you need to know is, okay, so let's just say for the sake of argument, you went back to the SVS room a couple of times, Okay, well, now when I go home and I can't listen to stuff, but other people are referencing this against the SVS as being very similar. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, I know I went back to that room a couple of times. There was just something about it that resonated with me. But now this person is saying it's similar to, that experience for them. So I'm going to add that brand to my list. I'm going to add that brand to my list. They're saying if you like the SVS sound, you're not going to like this speaker. So I don't have to maybe consider that. That's another great way to do it. But more often than not, don't think that you have to shop for something. There's a very real chance what you have is pretty good, because if I go by just what you guys tell me and share on a regular basis, either in the comments or DMs or emails, some of your products aren't even that old and you're already like, what do I buy next? And it's like, I was present when you emailed me 3 years ago and told me like, I bought that and I love it. If you've made a pretty sizable speaker purchase in the last couple of 2-3 years, there's a very real chance what you have is pretty good. Unless for some reason, maybe a kid knocked it over, dog ran into it, or you just like, no, that was my stopgap. Now I've got that, 10, 12, 15 grand or whatever. It's time. Okay, that's a different conversation.
So what would you say to people who might look to channels like this one as the driving force behind how they might be in a situation where they're constantly looking at the next
thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think really honestly, it comes down to an understanding of what it is everyone's doing here and a certain level of maturity. We are participating in a hobby. And a lot of times when you are a hobbyist, when you are someone that is an enthusiast of something, you just want to take in as much of that conversation, that content, that joy that you can. And a lot of times that does mean that you are going to read about, seek out knowledge of, want to know about things that may or may not directly impact you, directly relate to you, or be a part of your next purchasing decision, but that doesn't stop you from still wanting to know about it. For example, and I hate that cars are just the easiest thing in the world. I am in no way shopping for a car. In no way. I don't want to buy another car. I'm happy with my car. I don't even think about cars for myself as a purchasing decision now or in the foreseeable future. But when Throttle House launches their latest video of a BMW or a Mercedes or whatever, oh yeah, that's appointment viewing. Start to finish. Watch the whole video, you know? But when it's over, I appreciate the entertainment value. I appreciate the knowledge that I got, but I don't immediately look out my window at my Volkswagen and go, you piece of shit. I don't do that. And I think for a lot of people, and this is evident by viewer numbers versus comments, I think a lot of people can view this content in that same way. They watch us every, Friday or Sunday or both. And go, yeah, I appreciate that. I think, that was great. That served my need. And I moved on. And they may not even let us know. They just watched and moved on. I think it gets very easy to get stuck in the loop when you start to drill down a little bit more and you look at stuff like there's tiers to this. This is the easiest way to put it. There's tiers to this. First of all, hi-fi and home theater as a niche is like this big in the grand scheme of things, like cell phones, laptops, games, gaming consoles, hell, toaster ovens, mattresses, markets like this. Everyone needs those things. Hi-fi and home theater, it's about like this. Okay, so here we are. Now we're going to zoom in. So now we're here. People that just watch the video and say nothing, take it for the entertainment value, take it for the education, and move on with their lives. It's about this much. It's the bulk of it. The people that take it in, consume it, want to interact with other people, continue the discussion beyond the video, and get in the weeds with it, we're down here. And if you're in this group, there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it can also become its own little cyclone of turbulence. Good, bad, FOMO, no FOMO. You know what I mean? It can be something more than what it needs to be. And when that happens, it's important to reset and zoom out. Because when you zoom out, you can breathe. And when you can breathe, you can start to be a little bit more objective, look at things and go, okay, I see what this is. Throttle House is not buying or telling people to buy every single car that's on their channel. Now, on their channel, they may say like, oh, the BMW that wants to be a Bugatti. And people go, is it as good as a Bugatti? Click. Right. But, there's a certain just kind of amount of like, okay, am I reading too much into this? Am I thinking about this too hard? Am I worried about nothing? That we all need to address on some level. We really do. I hope that you know that about us by now, that I've gone on enough of these videos where I've said like, hey, these are going to be the differences, but based on what you're telling me, like, I don't think that you need to make a change. I don't think you need to buy anything, or you don't need to spend that kind of money. Have you considered just changing the placement, the orientation of your room? Are you sure your subwoofer is set up correctly? More often than not, that is the response that people get from me or Kristi in our comments. But I get it. I do. I get it. And this channel, part of this channel's job is also to present you with stuff that's come out. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the future forever with this channel, to be perfectly honest. There will be some more I don't know if educational is the right word, but there'll definitely be more thought pieces going into the future, definitely into the next year. Unfortunately, our calendar is set for the rest of this year. It really is. Like, we have everything that we know we're going to be producing between now and the first. But aside from that, in 2025, like I want to make sure that we're doing right by you guys in giving you all of the various levels and perspectives possible. And so that may require a little backing off on every week being, so-and-so released a new product. Here is the information. Here's what we think of it. And maybe it is a little bit more educational, infotainment, or just something different, But yeah, it does require just taking a step back.
Well, that's everything from me.
Okay. All right.
We may have to take that whole conversation and put it in a separate video.
I'll figure out how to interweave it. I don't know. I'll figure it out.
It was a good topic.
It was a great question too.
And I think it's very, it's kind of timely, and I think it's something that affects a lot of people.
Sure. And it's something that's been weighing very heavily on me, which I know that you know that because you're here with me every day. And I'm like, but no, it's dead on. It's dead on with many of my thoughts and concerns, and I plan on addressing them. So yeah, there you go. That is Unplugged 25. Q11 Meta. It was a good speaker. It was a fun review to do. It was, as much as maybe the outcome wasn't what some people liked, or they were really excited by the outcome. I don't know, but I enjoyed doing that review quite a bit. So
Me too.
It was a lot of fun. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching this episode of Unplugged. We have a new video on Sunday. An interesting question arose from Sunday's video that I'm very curious and kind of germane to how we ended this one, oddly enough. So tune in Sunday and we'll continue this whole thing we got going here. But until then, I just appreciate you guys watching, tuning in for these extra long, unscripted deep dives. And
I want to say a quick thank you to the people that have been able to help us raise money for the hurricane relief for people on the southern East Coast.
Yep.
We really appreciate your help.
Yep.
There.
And if you can give a little bit more, every little bit helps. They still need help. And so it's still going. So otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll see you guys Sunday. All right.